was grueling, it was unreasonable, it was stupid as hell. It was deeply like misogynistic and racist. It was horrific. It's an embarrassment. It's a national embarrassment, this test. And does not make me a better citizen, I can tell you that.
And Tristine Nguyen's journey to the UK has brought her from a slum in Saigon, Vietnam, to a Scottish estate. This is Writer's Mosaic, What We Leave We Carry, the series that tells the true life stories of migration to the UK.
My name is Tristine Nguyen, and I was born in Saigon, Vietnam. And my family emigrated to the US when I was 9, just in the early 90s, when Vietnam was just beginning to be opened up to the world again. I think it was around this time that the American government lifted the embargo for the country after a very brutal war. And things were just, there was a huge amount of energy and momentum and changes in the air in the nation. And fascinatingly, around the same time, around the early 90s, there was a mass influx of Vietnamese immigrants coming to the States. And a lot of that had to do with programs that the US government set up, sort of as, in my opinion, like a political petty vengeance against the enemy that they lost the war from. So they were really trying to encourage and make as easy as possible for Vietnamese to emigrate to America. I grew up in Saigon in Vietnam, and I was born in 81, just 6 years after the war ended. And my family lived in it's a very big city and very densely populated. And we actually lived in the slum in District 1 in Saigon. And it was my grandparents, my parents, and myself for a while until my brother was born. And we lived in this teeny tiny little house, 2-story house that were all in a row with so many other very low working class families. For example, the family next door to us, our neighbor, he was like a local policeman, and he raised pigs like in his front courtyard. While I was growing up during the late 80s, Vietnam was under very strict embargo from the US government. And then Vietnam was also involved with war with Cambodia. So the whole nation was just like in deep poverty. It was a very challenging time. For example, like I was actually classified as a malnourished child, because this was just like one of the normal categories that children were, sorted into, because that was just the norm. But at the same time, because everyone was so equally poor, the sense of community, and there was no like keeping up with the Joneses. People had I would say like a really pure and, I don't know, like hopeful and very like people paid very keen attention to one another, to what was happening in the neighborhood. My grandparents actually emigrated from the north of Vietnam in the 50s because they were escaping the Japanese occupation, and they were also trying to escape the Viet Minh, which was the Northern Communist Party, because they were worried that a famine was coming, and it actually arrived. The famine arrived, and I think it killed like millions of Vietnamese in the north during the 50s. So they settled in Saigon, and my grandpa was a driver, like a taxi driver for a while, and then he became a mechanic. And my grandma, um, who is one of the smartest women I've met in my life, was actually illiterate, entirely illiterate, and at first I think she was working as like a water carrier. So she would go to the public pumps and wait in line, for hours from 3 in the morning, and fill up her buckets with water and bring it to families that were wealthier. And then later on, she was a street hawker. She sold these amazing little rice cakes all over the city. And then my dad fought in the Vietnam War, but he was in the South Vietnamese Army, so he was alongside the Americans. So when the war finished, the new regime, the Communist Party, tried to put him to labor camp and re-education camp. And luckily or unluckily, I'm not sure how to interpret it still, but 2 days before the war ended, my father actually stepped on a landmine and lost half of his leg. And because of that, when the communist police came and rounded people up, he was just completely not able to move, and therefore he escaped decades of labor camp. But at the same time, because of his affiliation with the South Vietnamese Army, our entire family was blacklisted, even his unborn children. So my brother and I, we were officially blacklisted, which meant that we would never be able to qualify for any kind of government assistance, or we wouldn't even be allowed to apply to state universities, which were essentially the only type of universities that existed. So our future was pretty bleak. It was there was no question that we would move to the States. The only thing that of importance that I took with me was my notebook from school. It was the last notebook full of essays that I had written. That was it. I mean, we didn't even bring photographs or anything. We had so very little. I still have that notebook, and it's very funny because it has some of the teachers' remarks and comments, and I will completely embarrass myself by admitting that one of them wrote, well, it was very Mary Poppins. It was nearly perfect in every way. I took a sabbatical, and I was in Vietnam to work on anti-human trafficking for a bunch of UN agencies and NGOs. And it was there that I met my now husband, Ali. He's from Scotland, and he's been in Vietnam with a company that he set up. He's been there for 17 years. And we eventually got married, and his family has this very large estate in Scotland. And in 2015, we were given this very large house on the estate so that we would become the new caretakers of the place. And we decided that we would give it a go. And we made this very serious decision, a difficult decision to make, to see what we can achieve with such a beautiful, special property and a legacy for his family as well. And we've been here for 9 years now. The decision to leave Vietnam to go to Scotland was not an easy one, because I was having a very, amazing career. I was working at this point in private equity, and I thoroughly loved it. And I was being offered just incredible opportunities and growth, and I really love the work that I was doing. And going to such a rural area and essentially being sort of defined by my relationship to my husband instead of being defined by whatever I get to put out there is a slightly bizarre and if not unsettling feeling. I think to this day it still feels challenging to me because it's not the kind of path that I had like laid out for myself, and it still feels like in some ways I'm an extension of my husband's legacy and goals and sort of career wishes instead of something that I get to like completely define by myself. Being in rural Scotland, in some instances I encountered really innocent, sweet remarks that was puzzling to me. For example, I think during one of my earliest trips to Scotland, somebody asked if I was able to see properly out of my eyes because they were like, because I have, smaller eyes and whatever. And I know it wasn't a racist thing at all. I mean, I think it was just like a genuine curiosity. And this person was so sweet and really polite, and she was just, really kind. And I know that she didn't mean it in a racist way, but it was just so, and like it was so bewildering to me that somebody could think that I could possibly be like biologically impaired because I look different. Oh, I think the community is incredibly lovely and welcoming, and I've never had a sense that, it's not like my Asianness does not. I don't think it is something that people are even aware of. It's not a factor, which is super lovely. I think it's something that people are like, oh my gosh, like you're Asian and you're here when they're not in the community. You know what I mean? When it's like a visitor or something. So my children are, of course, half Vietnamese, half Scottish, and they are also Americans, and they have a very interesting accent. So I don't hear the American or the Scots accent very strongly, but it's definitely a hybrid of something, and they look very mixed, in my opinion. They look very like half Asians, and it's fascinating to me that none of these factors is like even on at all in their mind about their identity, like at all. The only thing that they think about vaguely is like, yeah, we go to Asia for holidays sometimes, and I used to live in America, but it's like it's not that kind of racial or ethnicity consideration is not like what they think about. It doesn't configure into their sense of self, which is so fascinating to me because it's such a big component for me. And and I think it's a testament to how welcome and how integrated they feel in this community. My children's lives are just a million miles away from everything that I've experienced, and also extremely different to what my husband experienced because he went to boarding school when he was like 6. And we are very active parents, and there's just absolutely no, I mean, we tell them stories about growing up, about our respective childhoods, and I think that and I have taken my children to see like the house in the slum that I grew up in Saigon, but there's absolutely no way whatsoever that they can even comprehend what it meant. Very often I question my motivations for doing things. Let's say it's baking a cake, because I hate baking cake, but I will do like the most excellent job because of this bizarre need for, as an immigrant, to make sure that you are like at the top of the game, to like overly prove yourself in everything you do, because you just know that you are held to a different standard. My parents have obviously very mixed emotions about me being in Scotland, because they truly feel that all my family are in the Bay Area in California, and it's the dream. It's a dream to have massive family gatherings, which we used to do all the time. And it is so exceptionally rare, I think, for both sides of my family, both my dad and my mom's side of families, to be in one place. It's just so special. And for my brother and I to be quite far away, my brother's on the East Coast and I'm in Scotland. It's quite heartbreaking for them. And like they all they want is to be grandparents, and their two grandchildren are in Scotland, and it's rare that we see them. We see them like maybe once a year, and it's challenging. They hope that eventually we'll be able to come back to the States, but we'll see. We'll see. This is so terrible, but like the British immigration system is absolutely hideous. In the States, you apply for your green card the one time and you have it and it's forever. And then after 5 years, or now 3 years now, you can become a citizen. I have had to apply for a spousal visa like 4 times because it only lasted for like 2.5 years. And I was finally able to apply for indefinite leave to remain without taking the most hideous test I've ever taken in my entire life. It's like the hardest test I've ever sat. It was grueling, it was unreasonable, it was stupid as hell. It was deeply like misogynistic and racist. It was horrific. It's an embarrassment. It's a national embarrassment, this test. And does not make me a better citizen, I can tell you that. In rural Scotland, there's this sort of like a very finely milled dustiness that is a mix between like warm hay and bark and like a note of sourness, probably from silage, um, which is not unpleasant, and a somewhat pregnant scent with rain as well, with like humidity because it's so lush and it's very wet in rural Scotland as well. So it's a very immediate, identifiable scent to me. And the sounds of Scotland, it has to be those annoying owls that hoot in the middle of the night at around 3 o'clock on the dot every single. My children definitely are so in love with their lives on the estates, and it is truly so incredibly beautiful and very special. There are a lot of things I'm missing from our typical lives too. I cannot even remember the last time I went to the theater or to a art gallery. And being away from my aging parents is not easy. So I think that ultimately we'll try to find a way to do both.
And Tristine Nguyen was talking to Marjorie Lotfi.